Okay, and we are live.
Welcome to Real Scoop Live, a show for pool chemistry enthusiasts where we talk about all the coolest chemistry stuff you never knew you wanted to know. Any chemical advice or suggestions are opinion and utilized at the discretion of each individual pool operator. With that out of the way, let's start the show.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Real Scoop Live. It's Stacy and the boys, and today we're going to talk about the drain strain. So I'm going to give it to the guys. Go
What
ahead.
What the heck is the drain strain, Matt?
Well, that's to me that means should I drain or not? You know, to drain or not to drain. Yeah. And this is one of those things. This is an unscheduled episode of RSL, but it's something that we thought we needed to do because of the types of calls that we've been getting lately, and also because winterizing is coming up. Because since it is September 16th, you shouldn't be closing your pool yet. You know, you should wait probably until at least, middle of October, end of October, if you can, or at least when it gets close to the first, not freeze, but the first frost. But at this time, if you have a lot of problems or any problems with your pool, this might be a good time to do a little bit extra drain, right? So the strain is determining whether you want to drain or how much you want to drain, or if you need to drain, or if you can get over what you think you need to drain for.
The strain is real.
The strain is real, right? So we have a whole bunch of stuff to talk about today. We're going to try, like always, to keep this short. I mean,
I feel like that's our running joke at this point. It's like, guys, we'll keep it short today. And like 4 hours later, thanks. We've got 3 more things to go over.
Now we're done with the first 2. We got 2 more. Yeah. So
we're just going to roll right into next week's.
Yes. So we do have some notes about this. But Brett, I mean, to me, there's when you're thinking about draining, obviously if you have a swamp, a really nasty pool that's been sitting for a long time, if it's filled with a lot of critters, that kind of stuff, sometimes that's better to drain than to start over. If it's really stained and you need to acid wash, of course you're gonna have to drain anyway. But there are a lot of things that a lot of chemical issues that people think that would be easy to drain, and it probably would be easier to drain. But there's so many viewers of this in particular, and there's customers of APIs and stuff like that across the country where you can't drain, or you're not allowed to drain, or you think that the water's going to be so much, but then you have to pay sewage fees, or if you have to have it trucked in, and then it ends up being a ton of money. And one of the things about this, and now, this may be a little API plug, and that's not what we're here for, but it kind of is, right? That's why we have our API shirts. There's many things that many of our products that you can use, which make it so you don't have to drain in a lot of circumstances, right?
We want you to get the most out of the water that you have for as long as you can, because it all adds up. I mean, just recently I saw that they made new laws out near Vegas that you can only have a certain square footage size pool being built from here forward to help counter water issues out there. And the water issues aren't going away. They're actually picking up speed and showing up in other places that you wouldn't necessarily expect them to show up.
Well, here in Central Texas, we just had, at least in the Austin area, we just went from the end of April all the way to the end of August without a drop of rain. So, there's a lot of conservation going on and everything else. And that's the thing, is that there's a point in time where the water just needs to be replaced. And you can tell if your dissolved solid reading gets way out of whack, right? Dissolved solids is a measurement of the amount of solids that are dissolved in the water. And so you can test that at a pool store. You can test it yourself if you get a meter, all that kind of thing. But there's a lot of things to consider when you're talking about dissolved solids. Number one, how long has the water been in there? How much evaporation do you have a salt pool, that kind of thing? Because with salt pools, the TDS is artificially inflated. Well, not artificially inflated, but it's, it has salt in there, and salt's not necessarily bad as far as the health of the water. But you need to know how old the water is. It used to be, when I got in the business, that it was recommended that you change the water every 5 years. But now I don't really know that there is a guideline, so to speak, or if people have come off of that 5 years, because now it's more technical in the sense that you can say, all right, so if my source water has a dissolved solid of, say, 500, then that means that you need to start worrying about the water at 2,500, right? But you also have to take the salt into consideration. So you do 2,500, then the salt reading, you minus the salt off the 2,500, and then there's you check for the difference. So really it's about 2,000 dissolved solids minus the salt is the difference between when you want to drain and when you don't. So I know that some places, especially in like Arizona in the Southwest, that you're talking about pools that will evaporate between 6 and 9 feet of water every season. So you're essentially
refilling the pool.
You're essentially
and just concentrating it all summer.
Right. But the problem is that all the dissolved solids don't evaporate; only the water does. So you do get that compression. So you have to consider that too.
Harry, whoo, Mr. Wizard science experiment time. Any of our viewers who live by the ocean, take a gallon of water and boil it on the stove until all the water's gone. What's the stuff that remains on the bottom? That's all the dissolved solids that came out of the ocean. Now, add more ocean water to the top of it and boil it till it goes away. Did the crust get bigger or smaller? Bigger, because you just added more stuff to it.
Yeah.
Next time, we'll show you how you can play a record with a needle and a piece of construction paper. You actually can do that. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. That's our science corner for the day.
That's right.
So anyway, so there are a lot of ways to get away from that. So a lot of times that people will go into a pool store or they'll look on the internet and they'll say, when do I need to drain, or what do I need to do about this or that? There are a few things that you'd have to drain the water for. Traditionally, especially nitrates, there's really nothing you can do about nitrates. So if your nitrate level gets too high, then what happens essentially is that your chlorine becomes ineffective. And it really doesn't matter how high your chlorine gets to. You're still going to be at a
deficit.
At a deficit, so you're always going to have bacteria growth, algae growth, all the other stuff, because the nitrates actually counteract the chlorine. So that's one of them.
One fun thing about nitrates, I actually, in reading a couple of different manufacturers' guidelines for where they want chemicals to be for certain pieces of equipment, some of them even mention 5 parts per million of nitrates, and you need to drain and dilute to get it back down. So that's not just on the chemical side. It's manufacturers now realizing that, hey, this is directly impacting how well our stuff can work, because, for example, you got a salt cell that's running at 100%. You got nitrates in the water. It's like it's not doing anything except making your pH go up. So it affects multiple things down the line. Sorry to interrupt.
That's right. No. It's a conversation, right? It's a discussion. It's not any, I'm not trying to be lecturing or anything. So there's that. A lot of people think that if they have ammonia that they need to drain the water out. You don't. You can get rid of ammonia. But nitrates and then cyanuric acid, there are products out there, and we've talked about this before, but there's products out there that can help to mitigate the high cyanuric acid if you follow all their rules, or their directions to a T. But a lot of people just say, well, I'll just drain some water off. Just remember, though, is that the cyanuric acid gets embedded into the shell of the pool as well. So you don't want to just drain the water and refill it. You need to drain it and then clean the walls as you're draining. Now, I will tell you, and this is what I was getting at, and see how it comes back around now, is that if you have a high cyanuric acid, switching over to products such as Easy Pool for chlorine or Pepper for salt pools.
Oh, Easy Pool for chlorine pools.
For chlorine pools and Pepper for salt pools. Pretty much takes the cyanuric acid out of the game, because these products it doesn't matter. And so essentially what will happen is that you'll be using Easy Pool for a traditional pool or chlorine pool, and the amount of chlorine that you need will go way down. The amount of cyanuric acid that gets in the pool will cease, and then through attrition or through backwashing, splash out, and all the other stuff, your cyanuric acid will end up going down. But in the meantime, if you start at like 150 or 200, you can get that down without worrying about the effectiveness or the cleanliness or the healthiness of the pool. And that's one of the great things about our products, is that we can actually prolong the life of the water. And so we want you to keep your water. You want to keep your water. We need we need water in so many parts of the country and in the world that it's a precious commodity that we don't want to waste.
So. To look at it from another side, so say you decided you're pulling the trigger and we've got to drain some of this water out because it's the best option right now. Do you know what's coming in with the new water? Because like we've said in multiple episodes, source water is becoming an issue everywhere, and it's not getting better really anywhere. I'm sure there'll be one place where it's like, oh, it got better. But for the majority of the country, it's an issue. Like here in Indiana, we have people that have total alkalinity that comes out of the tap at 220. So you have people with brand new pools initially having to add like 14 gallons of acid just to bring it down to the point where you can actually balance the water. So if you're trying to drain your pool because you think, well, my alkalinity is high, I'll refill it and dilute it out, and you're filling it up with water that's also high alkalinity, it's not going to do anything. Not to mention that's a waste of water because you can fix alkalinity with other issues. But if you have nitrates in your water and you're filling off of a well, may not be a bad idea to check your well to see if you got nitrates in there, because you could potentially be putting them back in and then you just wasted time, money, and really stressed out your well pump.
That's a great thing for you to bring up, Brett, because in Central Texas, there's a lot of places around here where the water comes out of the tap at a 425 calcium. Now, for those of you that don't know, with alkalinity, you should be anywhere between 80 and 110 or 120 parts per million. And Brett's talking about stuff coming out of the tap at 220 to 250, where with the calcium, you want it to be between 200 and 400. But if it comes out of the tap at 450 or 500, you're already in that danger zone. And so draining water to lower your calcium is not going to help you at all, unless your calcium's like at 1,000 or something, right? So it really is important. And now if you think about that as on a macro level, think about all the news that you've been hearing recently about the crazy chemicals that are in tap water that they're finding all over the country, right? I mean, we all know about Flint, but that you think about New York City and some of the news stuff that just came out from that, and then that's the water that you want to replace your water that can be saved in your pool with. It's just not one of those things.
I was actually
that you necessarily need to do.
I was actually talking yesterday to some folks about this exact thing, in that a lot of the infrastructure, water specific in this country, is pushing 100 years old. So a lot of the stuff that we know now that they didn't know back then is still coming into play because they used pipes with materials that we wouldn't necessarily use now. And we're having to deal with the issues from those pipes that are still underground.
Yeah.
So yeah,
there's a part of that really that we haven't even touched on, and that's phosphates, right? Now we've talked about phosphates in different episodes. Yeah. But back in the 60s, phosphates were so prevalent that they actually were killing ponds and lakes, and so they outlawed them. So from say like the end of the 60s, early 70s, all the way up until the mid 90s, the phosphates, in source water and in products was banned. And so, but what happened was essentially is that when you're talking about phosphates, especially orthophosphates, which are all the same thing, but phosphonic acid, which is used to prolong the life of the pipes and the infrastructure in most cities, they didn't have that protection for 25 years. And then in the mid 90s, they said, oh no, wait, exactly what Brett said. If we have this infrastructure that's been there for 100 years that is now starting to deteriorate because we don't have anything to protect it, we need to put the phosphates back in the water. And that's why phosphate products really weren't around prior to like the mid to late 90s, and I know that some of you probably aren't that old, sorry, but I'm just saying. So now phosphates are all over the place because they're trying to prolong the life of the infrastructure of the water supply. So they're adding that and other things too. So you get phosphates in your water and you get algae.
They don't think about the pool professional when they're taking care of source water or water treatment or anything like that. That's how we're so lucky to end up with combined chlorine coming in from the tap, phosphates coming in from the tap, and really, it's kind of amazing the wide range of balance factors that you can get right out of the tap as well. Because we focused a lot on water balance because it doesn't get as much play as it should, because it is a very important part of keeping your pool and spa happy and healthy. The alkalinity coming out at 220 here That's twice as much as you need. Calcium, you're kind of at the mercy of where they're getting the water from, because you can't really get calcium out effectively short of reverse osmosis, which is expensive and time consuming, or water softeners, but they don't want to do that on a grand scale because it would cost way too much.
And take a lot of time.
pH can range, like pretty big range on there. Now, obviously they want to keep it a little bit more basic just to help protect the pipes, just like with the phosphates that they add to provide a little bit of scale on the inside of the pipe. Hey, remember scale forming? I think we talked about that in another one.
We have.
So there's really one of the first questions I ask when people have chemical issues is, have you tested your source water? Because there could be a lot of problems that you're putting in just when you turn the tap on.
So the other part of that too is whether the source water, especially if you're in a retail situation or even a service company, is when you're filling it, is it coming from a well or is it coming from the city, right? And if it's coming from a well, how dry has it been or how wet has it been? Because the aquifer, depending on how deep the well is, could be skimming the top of the aquifer, it could be down at the base of the aquifer, and if the aquifer gets less and less water, then it gets more condensed, and you get typically harder water. So there's a lot of things to consider, but basically what we're saying is that if you get to a point where you think you need to drain, there are some things that you can do to avoid that draining, unless it's something structural, an acid wash, fixing a crack, even there's some stuff
physical repairs, resurfacing,
physical
paint
repairs,
jobs,
resurfacing,
hard to paint
jobs,
underwater.
Yeah.
Tried once.
And so with the few minutes we have left, let's talk about that for a second. Why don't you, Brett, if you talk about hydrostatic pressure, unless Stacy wants to. Stacy, you want to talk about hydrostatic pressure?
I'm gonna go ahead and defer to Brett.
You know what? I am too.
She's talked about it so much this week. She doesn't even want to think about hydrostatic pressure anymore.
I'm so tired of talking about it. Yeah.
So hydrostatic pressure, think of a boat. Boats are pretty heavy, but you put it in water and the water actually pushes back up against the boat, and that's what keeps it buoyant in the water and floating. Think of your pool. It's actually it's kind of shaped like a boat. A little bit. Use your imagination. You can, mush it a little bit in parts, but the hydrostatic pressure of the water, the groundwater, the water that's actually in the ground, that's why they named it that, can raise up at certain points. So say you had a real crazy deluge of a rainstorm, or a water main burst, or you've got really bad drainage around your pool, or you're next to a pond or a lake. The water level in the ground can actually be high enough that if you drain your pool, you've essentially created a boat. And if the water pressure is higher than the lowest point of your boat pool, we'll figure out a better name for that later.
It's fine.
It can actually lift the pool out of the ground. If you actually get, if this strikes your curiosity, Google pool floating and look at some of the pictures you've seen, because there were some pretty insane instances of this happening where a 50-meter pool came out of the ground that far to the point where you can actually see the plumbing and everything else. And the bad part is you don't have the ability to do anything to fix that. It's a complete tear it down and start over, because you don't think it's not just the pool that shifted. It's all of the equipment, all of the plumbing. How am I ever going to true this out to make sure that it holds water and is as functioning the way it is? It's such a big concern. Think about fiberglass pools. Fiberglass pools, boats, a lot of times are fiberglass. They're pretty lightweight in terms of pools, because other pools are made with concrete and gunite and rebar and all that heavy stuff.
It's all relative, right? They're light compared to all the other ones, but they
can still be beefy, strong pools, but you take a lot of water out of them. It takes a lot of the weight off of it too. So a lot of fiberglass pool manufacturers even have in their warranties that say, don't ever drain this pool, because they know it can happen. So they actually have little devices called hydrostatic relief valves in a lot of pools that essentially it's like a reverse check valve. So if the water pressure from under the pool is pushing up, it'll actually pop the top on this relief valve and let the water come into the pool from underneath. Now you might think, well, that's a bad thing. What do I got to do with that water? It's actually, you just throw a pump in and pump it out while you're doing your work in there. It's a lot better than floating a pool, having to tear it up and start over again. So that's something that you're talking about is not something that a homeowner would necessarily do. You get a pool professional, especially a licensed pool professional that knows what they're doing, that would use one of those
Otherwise, you have a risk of ruining your pool for good.
So that's another big asterisk. If you ever have to drain your pool, where's your water table right now? Did it just rain for the last 3 weeks? Has it been dry like Matt's backyard for the last 8 months?
Jeez.
Matt could probably dig pretty far down before he gets any water right now.
Oh yeah.
Which he's going to be doing this weekend.
My well's 1,200 feet, so that's how.
Is that all?
We have to go. Yeah, that's it. So here we are. We're talking about straining yourself when you're thinking about draining your pool, and what we're saying is that if it's a chemical nature, for the most part, you can actually take care of that. A lot of the contaminants that Brett has been talking about can be addressed by using products like Revive. Right, Revive can pull out calcium carbonate. It can help pull out some other, like metals that would come in from well water and things like that. It can pull out phosphates. So if you have a problem with any of those things, there's actually products out there that can help you with it. If you have ammonia, you can address ammonia. If you have any questions about how to do it, you can either email us or text us or call us at the number on the bottom of the screen. With cyanuric acid, you can use products like Easy Pool or Pepper to really just take that out of the situation. So if you have a swamp, you can treat it with the swamp too. There's a lot of work to it, and you might think it's kind of gross to swim in that water that has been, filled with all kinds of things, but you can do it. Now, I have had times when there have been large dead things in pools that are really nasty. If it grosses you out, then by all means, drain the pool out. Just take into consideration what Brett has said, that, do it at the right time of year, make sure that you're doing it correctly, have a hydrostatic relief valve if you know what that is, or hire someone that does. So now let's talk about spas for just a couple minutes, Brett. We want to end this in 3 minutes. So with pools, you pretty much don't have to do it unless the dissolved solids gets really high. What about spas?
Spas are kind of a neat one because generally you can drain, refill, and be up and running in a typical hot tub in about a day. So if you've got specific chemical issues, now obviously we want to keep the water as long as we can. But if it gets to the point of cost analysis, if I've got to do 19 different things to get this water back, it might be easier, faster, and a heck of a lot less stressful to dump it and start over. It's usually a much smaller amount of water. 350 gallons to 500 is a typical backyard spa. And just looking at different water rates across the country, you can probably refill the tub for about $1 or less, which from city water,
from water, right? But
just
then you
have
to rebalance it, reheat it. So, it's more than just $1. It's kind of getting a free dog. There's no such thing as a free dog.
Yeah.
So, but how often or when should you do that? Because, my old adage is when in doubt, drain it out, right? For spas, when in doubt, drain it out. But on an average, how long does spa water last for people? How long should they keep it in the spa?
Typically 6 months is the average going time on a hot tub when it's recommended to drain and refill. And it's based off of usage. So if you don't use your tub all that often, you can get a longer time out of it because you're not putting extra people particles in the hot tub that are going to be floating around, adding to your TDS. Because you leave a little bit of, a little pool pudding.
Yeah.
You leave a little bit of yourself in the spa every time you get out, and it could go on a Hallmark card. That's pretty much what it is. You don't want to have a buildup of excess TDS in your hot tub because it can cause other issues. If you're using other products that can take stuff out and keep TDS in check,
I mean, like Start?
Like Start. Yeah, that's one. It's like Hot Water Revive. I generally will drain my tub once a year, whether it needs it or not, just because I get the itch to do something outside in the middle of December, and draining and refilling the hot tub seems like a good thing to do. I don't know why. I want to go outside after being inside for a couple months.
Right. So typically, someone, if you want to, it's kind of like changing your filters in your house. You put it on your phone, say 6 months from now, 8 months from now, or a year from now, depending on your usage, right? I mean, because we all know that when you get a spa, you use it a lot more than when you've had it for a couple of years, right? So if you put something as a reminder in your phone, hey, this weekend, six months from now or 8 months from now is when I want to drain the spa, you should be good to go. But at any point, at any time, if you feel like your spa is either not healthy or something's wrong or it stinks or whatever, well, I mean, you can drain it. You know, you can drain it and refill it. It's not a big deal. I mean, we do it every so often here just because, you know, our son might have a party with a whole bunch of teenagers in there and stuff like that. And maybe like, well, we don't, you know, we'd rather sit in our own funk than other people's funk.
Draining and refilling a spa is a lot less of a nuclear option than it is in a pool.
Right.
Because you can be up and running at the end of the day.
Right.
It might not be quite as hot as you had it before, but it'll get there.
Yeah. Well, in the summer, it's actually better, right? So in the summer, we tend to have ours like at 90, where in the winter, it's like 102. So, all right. So I think that we covered everything. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, feel free. Leave the comments underneath. We'll look at them and address them in the next RSL or individually if you want to. You can call or text us at 877-274-7261. Like and share if you are so inclined. We'd appreciate it. And I think that we're going to call that a day. So from Central Texas, this is Matt Rybar signing off. You guys? From Central Indiana, this is Brett. Bye-bye.
And from the sunny coast of Florida, this is Stacy. Bye.
Have a great weekend.
Love you like I do.